Hi my friends, today I will talk about useReducer hook. First of all, let's start by talking about what this hook does. useReducer is a state management hook. In other words, it helps to manage more complex states together and make our code more readable and minimizes unneeded re-rendering that may occur. I created a simple application. As you can see, when I click the new image button, randomly new photos come. Let's go back to our code here. I created a simple form, and when we press this button, the handle submit function you see here is triggered when the form is submitted, and the operations performed here. I used prevent default here so that the page is not refreshed, and I request an URL by using fetch, and I update the state image state with the URL that return from that link. And if something goes wrong, we catch it, and if such a page is not found, I print an error message on the screen. Let's try it. I add one more letter to get an error. I save it and click new image. As you can see, we get an error here. This error comes from here. Okay, I fix it. Click again. Okay, we don't get any error for now. Here, as you can see, I use the same states in several stages. For example, when the button is clicked, I make loading false and make set image to an empty string, and the set error is also empty string. You may be wondering why we do this. To illustrate shortly, if I remove them, let's remove them for now, and click new image. As you can see, I can get photos without any problems. But if there's a problem with the internet connection or the server, let's try it again. Refresh and click new image. Okay, we get the error. But if the problem is fixed, click again. The error message is still here, but we don't have any problem by fetching images. That's why we reset the states here. So I remove them, the comments I mean. Now let's get back to our topic. As you can see, we use states in our function in three different states. In three different actions. Just before the fetching, and after the fetching becomes successful, and if the fetching is failed. This is just an example. Depending on your project, there may be tens or even hundreds of states, and typing them one by one can cause bad readability of your code and the unneeded re-rendering. Here, useReducer saves us. We can define these states in a more organized way by using useReducer and by giving names to these actions. Let's start by importing it. I will import it next to useReducer. useReducer returns two values, just like useState. Let's create it. The first is state itself, and the second is dispatched, which allows us to update the state. useReducer. Here we will give two arguments to the useReducer hook. The first is a function and the second is an object containing our initial values. These initial values will be the same as the values we gave by creating state with useState hook. So let's create them. Reducer function. By the way, you can give any name. And the second is an object. And inside the object we specify the initial values. For example, for image, let's say image is an empty string and the loading is false as initial value as initial, and the error is an empty string. Okay, I save it. Okay, now it's time to create reducer function. So let's create it here. Function reducer function. This reducer function takes two parameters. The first is state and the second is action. State and the second is action. We will give the names to the actions in the function where we perform the fetching operations, and we will determine which state will be when the action occurs. You will understand better with examples in a moment. In order not to get an error, I first make sure that the action type is not empty. So let's write a statement action.type. If action.type is not empty, now we will give the names to our actions. We define them completely. Let's say fetch start. So if action.type equal to fetch start, what we do on the states when we start the fetching process. So here we make set loading false, set image an empty string, and set error is empty string as well. So we specify it here. We write return and we send an object. Inside this object we specify the states. So loading states. Let's try loading as initial value is false and the image is an empty array and the error is empty also. I save it. Now when the fetch process starts, this if statement will be true. Now let's write the states that will be updated when the fetch operation is successful. So let's write else if action.type equal to, let's say, fetch success. Return an object again. What we do here, we make loading true. Let's say loading true, and we save the link from the URL to set image. We use the URL here. So how do we send this link to this function, to reducer function? We will do it via payload. We can get the URL by doing action.payload. We will see that in more detail in a moment, don't worry. So let's say image action.payload. You will understand what I mean in a moment. And finally, let's consider the actions we will take if there is a problem with the server or when there is a problem with the internet connection. So I mean here. So set loading false. So let's do it. Else if action.type equal to fetch error. By the way, you can give any name. I specify them now. Okay, we return an object again, loading false, and we will write an error message here. Say error. I will copy the message here, and as the last one, image is empty string. Okay, I save it. Now we have completed all the operations. Now let's make the needed changes in our function. I mean the handle submit function. First of all, I delete the states we created before. We don't need them anymore. I delete it. Delete this one and these. Okay. Now we will perform the needed operations here using the dispatch method to make changes in the state. First, I call the dispatch function and I will send values to this function in an object. For example, I write, for example, here let's say dispatch, and inside object we set type fetch start. We write the same expression where we wrote here. Okay. Just before the fetching operation begins, this function will be invoked. I mean, it will be triggered. And let's trigger the function that will be executed when the fetching operation is successful. I mean here. So let's write again dispatch, and inside the object fetch success. It was fetch success. Okay, fetch success. Dispatch, I miswrote it. Dispatch. Okay. I also had to send the URL. As you know, I will do this via payload. So let's write payload res.url. This comes from here, and we catch this URL inside the fetch success statement. You say it comes from action.payload. So we send payload here. Okay, finally I will make the actions that will take place when there is a problem with the server. I mean when there is an error. So let's do it here. Dispatch, and inside object we write fetch error. Okay, as you can see, I have completed the operations that will take place in a very simple and more readable way. Finally, we were using states in our form, which we created directly via useStateHook. But now we will get these values from useReducer. Let's make the changes quickly. So this error comes from this state. So let's write state.error, and state.error, and this loading state comes from the useReducer hook, and this image value comes from state. Okay, we get these states from useReducer. I save it. Let's refresh the page and perform the fetch operation. As you can see, when I click the button, I perform the fetch operation without any problems. Now let's try to get an error. I change the link again and I save it. Click. Okay, we got the mistake. Now I will fix the link again. I click the new image button. Okay, the error message has gone away. This is a simple application. You may not feel the effect of useReducer here, but when you deal with complex applications and dozens of state management in the future, you can do a tighter state management. I hope it was informative enough. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to write. See you in the next video.